Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Enabling the Classrooms of Tomorrow, sponsored by Symantec. Today's speakers are Ben Orencia, Matthew Peebles, and Mark Robinson. Ben is the National Practice Manager for Education Programs and Initiatives within Symantec's Public Sector Strategic Programs organization. He has worked in the industry for over 18 years in technical sales, channel, contracts, operations, and business development. With over 12 years at Symantec, working with education, state, and local governments, Ben has focused on providing solutions for today and tomorrow with Symantec's expertise in security and the data center. Matthew is president of Advanced Marketplace Incorporated, a business solution provider that believes in implementing technology solutions that transform clients' businesses' environments. Matthew is active in his community through speaking opportunities to various teen groups at schools and church organizations. He enjoys spending free time with his wife and 4 children. Mark is the Symantec Practice Manager for Advanced Marketplace. Mark is a talented IT professional with over 20 years of experience in large corporations and small to medium-sized businesses. His core strengths are management of technology-based pre- and post-sales capabilities, including architecture design, security, endpoint and mobile management, and application packaging and streaming. Now, before I pass things off, I'd like to mention 2 quick things. If at any time during the presentation you have questions, please post them in the Q&A panel on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Also, please be on the lookout for a follow-up email with a copy of the slides, a certificate of attendance, and a link to the archive to review and share with colleagues. Now, I'd like to pass things off to Ben.
Thank you, Michael, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Michael mentioned, my name is Ben Orencia. I'm the Practice Manager for the Education vertical here at Symantec. And joining me today are Matthew Peebles and Mark Robinson from Advanced Marketplace. So thank you guys for joining me and welcome. Today we're going to discuss the securing the classroom of tomorrow, which is in many cases here today. How are we securing and managing the information while we're leveraging technology today in the classroom? So we're hoping that you walk away today with some knowledge of how to do that, with some recommended strategies, securing your environments, leave you with a few points of what's going on within the threat landscape today as well. So as many of you know, the challenges today in the environment is it's constantly changing. And we're, again, leveraging technology in the classroom, and many teachers today, almost 80%, believe that technology is having a positive effect in their classroom. We're seeing that 47% of schools and middle schools are doing curriculum online and streaming that. Almost 100% of teachers are having computers in the classroom. So definitely a changing environment. What is demand and what's being asked of from the technology perspective? All of us have devices. My kids do as well, right? And they want to be connected. They want anytime, anywhere. They want that access. Some of them, want to make sure it's secure, and some of them don't care. They just want to make sure they can get that information when they want it. And they're using it in a number of ways, right? So they have their laptops, they have their smartphones, they have their tablets. In many cases, I know in higher ed, there are students looking to ask for access with their phone, their laptop, their tablet, their Xbox, their PlayStation. And in one case, I had one CIO tell me that they had a student ask why they can't get all 18 devices connected to the network. So ever-changing environment. And from a school perspective, and I'm sure many of you experienced this on how do we better leverage this digitally connected culture, right? How can we deliver the information, the curriculum, and the content quickly, securely, and efficiently, with obviously the main goal of raising the student outcomes. And with that, though, there's policies and manuals that need to be followed and also developed to follow to protect not only the information, right, but the student and the school as well. So as I mentioned, the classroom changes. A little illustration here of the classroom I kind of remember. The one on the right may look familiar to some. I actually showed it to my kids, and they were like, "What's that from, Dad?" And I said the Jetsons, and they had no idea what that was either. But that third picture on the bottom is pretty much, you could take that picture in my living room almost any day of the week, right? And again, it's an environment, and kids today, they don't know any differently, right? They expect to have that information at their fingertips, and as you can see, no matter what device they have in their hands or on their lap. So what do we do about it, right? What do we need to prepare for in today's digital classroom, right, as we're leveraging this technology? Many initiatives out there around BYOD, bring your own device. Many have called that BYOR, bring your own risk. And what's the threat management that needs to happen with that? Obviously, growth of digital textbooks and access to content digitally as well, right? So how is that controlled? And to stream that content, right? How do you deliver that, right? And then what's the access to, and who can get that content as it's being delivered to them? And then the assets, right? How do you manage the assets of not only the information, the critical information, but the content, and then also understanding the assets you have from an infrastructure standpoint and making sure you're managing that, patching that as well. Fifth point here, we won't touch on this one, but I think another point again is around information governance, right? Having the protection and access compliance. As a side note, we did another webinar of that last week, and as anyone interested in that can contact myself as we get towards the end of this after this webinar. So with that said, Matthew, Mark, let me ask you guys a question as far as what you guys have seen out there in today's environment and some of the challenges with some of the schools you've worked with.
Ben, I think one of the things we see on a regular basis is that first bullet point, right? It talks about bring your own device, or like you said, bring your own risk. We get that question on a regular basis from our customers. They're trying to determine if we own equipment and deploy it in the environment, what can we do or not do with that equipment? What if somebody wants to connect with equipment that we don't own? Are we able to control what's happening on that device? I know Mark and I had a conversation the other day specific around that with an iPad and giving people access to company information or would be information, student information or training information. And if we don't own that iPad, how do we pull that information back? What if it's a Surface 2 or Surface 3? How do we get that information? Mark, I thought you had a pretty good answer of just kind of talking through some of the solutions that we use to control that. You want to comment there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. So it's what's nice with the Symantec portfolio is the breadth of solutions on the devices that we're dealing with now in education. So as Matthew mentioned, the iPads and Android, we have the App Center solution. And that lets us manage both school-owned equipment and BYOD equipment with some different policies, right? If it's managed by, if you own it and you're letting a student or faculty use that device, you certainly want control over that device and how it's being used. Much more so than the student that's bringing their own device in. We don't want to control the device. What we want to do is control access to the data. So and back with the Surface and with your traditional laptops, with our application streaming, we can provide access to the information. But when that student finishes that course, when they've finished up that grade, they don't need access to that content. We can pull that data right back off of the device, or we call the device because we know that is using the different solutions that we have.
Mark, that slide that's up there now, that last bullet point, I think is probably another one of the top questions that we hear from customers, making sure the device is not used as a toy, because any of these devices, whether it's Android, right, Surface, iPad, laptop, whatever device they've deployed, what if somebody's going to try to use that thing beyond the intent that I have for them as an educator? You want to speak to that briefly?
Sure, absolutely. So, right, I mean, if we're spending money to provide these tools to our students, we want to make sure that they're using them as we expect them to, not as another platform to run Minecraft from. So using MDM on the mobile devices, we can block access to the native stores to be able to prevent applications being installed that we're not providing to them. And on the Windows OS side, Mac, traditional desktop laptop, we can use tools to whitelist applications to prevent unwanted data from being installed. Not only from preventing from being used as a toy, but it limits down our threats, the threat vectors for malware to come in as well.
Yeah, and Mark, so I'll just take a point here as well as an example I heard is, and like I said, not even just from a malware, even from an internal threat. We all know today's kids and students and are curious, right? And they're also very tech savvy as well. And I have an example at a school that actually had a student create an app to access their gradebook system and actually went in and changed the grades. You know, so again, to your point, right, being able to making sure that those things can be locked down and managed appropriately. But that's one way to get the GPA up, I guess. So Mark, can you speak to kind of as far as management of the e-learning assets, right, and some of the kind of recommended strategies around that as I build this slide out, right, so customers can understand how they can use a strategy for that as with not only the assets but as they embrace the mobile device strategy as well.
So I mean, it sounds rather simple, but we can't secure and we can't manage devices that we don't know about. So the core of you know, the ITMS suite is getting that visibility, learning, and keeping all the assets that we own, manage, deliver content to, whatever we're doing to them, we want them into a common database. Be able to relate those back to their location, back to their user. We want rich information around this. Even with asset management, we can tie into your procurement system. We can use it as a procurement system to find vendors, renewals, warranties, good information around it. So now that we know about our infrastructure, where everything is, who uses it, who owns it, and who's responsible for it, then we can start managing that security policy around how we want them to be used, what policies around applications get delivered to each different device, and how using our asset management tool set. So that's where the ITMS tool set comes in. We can also pull data out of App Center and then use that. Once we have it, we can do the good hygiene of equipment, patch management of the equipment, do some remote support for that, and even down to rolling it out from an imaging perspective as well to get these devices out of the warehouse and back in front of the users. So we see this as a large part of what we're talking about with school districts, especially come summertime and between semesters when there tends to be a large IT buy. Be able to pull the information in, know what we have, provision that equipment, and get it back out into the classrooms, into the hands of the student, and keep track of everything is vital.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And I guess even in speaking to this, you know, as we talked a little bit earlier about the kind of digital content delivery curriculum being delivered in a different format than we used to traditionally, right, with you know, the schooling of our students. You speak to some of this around the streaming technology capabilities, but then obviously making sure we're managing, sharing that appropriately as well.
Sure. So we see, so I mentioned some about asset management and managing the devices themselves. Really what I look at with digital content delivery is that's managing the experience for the user. So there's a very good place for, you know, making sure the operating system is patched and making sure we know what's on the device. But when it comes to content delivery, the device doesn't care about the content, the user does. So how do we get that content back to the user, regardless of which lab they've logged into, which computer they're accessing from? And that really is the core of what application streaming allows me to do, is we can actually provision applications to a user And as long as the device they're logged into has a streaming client, they will get that application. What's nice is this also, I guess, future-proofs or today-proofs. I know a lot of our clients are moving to VDI for the classroom. Some are moving to Citrix solutions to allow remote access to the school environment from home and dorm rooms and so forth. And so by having the same content streamed to a student-owned device, a lab computer, and a VDI computer, Citrix session, that really lets us have a really rich user experience. And that user session, the changes they made follows them around from device to device as well. So what's additionally, aside from that, right, we don't have to worry about rolling applications, the entire stack of applications in many universities. Even if you just go down to School of Business or School of Engineering or different places, can be staggering. So you kind of get caught into this, do I have special use labs with an application stack onto them, and how do I maintain the updates for all of those? When I'm streaming to a user, those updates we're able to put in place in real time. So if there's an update to AutoCAD, I can make the new update available the next time a user logs in and launch it. They're getting that new version of AutoCAD. We don't have to do a rollout campus-wide for an application that may not be used by more than a percentage of the students. So there's a lot of advantages to streaming. And additionally, if we're going to stream to, thank you.
No, I was going to say to your point there too, right, with that is that, you're saving yourself costs on the licenses as well, right, because like you said, not everyone needs to necessarily use the application. So from a cost savings perspective, you're able to save on not having to license every device or every machine out there that potentially could use the application.
Exactly. So kind of talk some about the application side. If you could, I know you've been very living the land of what's new in the threat landscape these days. If you want to fill us in on what you're seeing in education.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. So maybe do a little education here around what we've seen and leveraging our global intelligence network across the board, and some of the things that I think apply that have come out of our Internet Security Threat Report. As you see here, there's some five areas here, and we'll touch on all of them, right? We talked a little bit about mobile. We'll go back to that. I'll talk a little bit about the ransomware and data breaches and some of the things that have happened in the landscape, in the past year. And one of the big things that we've seen is we're calling the mega breach. So as I build this out here, you'll see, from 2011, there was a number of breaches and, almost over 200 million identities exposed. In 2012, seems to actually scale down a bit. And then as we go into last year, we see that big increase in spike on 253 breaches and 552 million identities exposed. And there's a big number I think you'll see there is in 2012, where we see greater than 10 million identities being breached. There was one event. In 2013, there was 8. So we're seeing that as as kind of the year of the mega breach. And I know some I'm actually in Virginia, and I know there's some schools close to this area that had some challenges around data breaches and losing identities from not just the students today, but alumni as well. And just throw out some statistics for you as well, as far as how does it impacting the sector of education. When you look at it, you'll see that healthcare was a large portion of the breaches that were accounted for. But the thing I highlighted there in that yellow box, the next biggest sector is education at 12%. So obviously a spike in education being targeted for breaches as well. So you need to make sure you have that, security strategy and overarching strategy, right, as you leverage the technologies and the devices and the people that are accessing the information, the curriculum that's out there and that you're providing. One other thing we've seen is that, fake AV, I think not many people are getting fooled by that anymore, right? So they kind of know that it's not real when they see it, but what they don't know is that, ransomware is becoming popular. And in this example, as you see on the screen, right, it looks like it's from a government agency. They're saying your computer's been locked, right? Click here or provide us with this information to unlock. And I actually had an example of my son's friend's older sister. Her dad called me and said, Ben, my daughter had a box pop up on her laptop, which she uses, and she's going to an Ivy League school next year, and she had all of her application documents and essays and work on the laptop, and it popped up on, it's like, what do we do about this? Can you help us? And it's asking for a credit card to decrypt all of her files. So it can hit home, and then obviously, in that example, obviously affecting a friend of ours with her schoolwork. And as you can see here, a quick little illustration as far as the growth of that, right? So obviously, the bad guys out there are obviously learning to learning to evolve as well, right? In regards to being cyber criminals and targeting, home users, which also obviously affect our students, and then they're the ones who are, also walking around with devices accessing the school networks. So, going back to mobile, and wanted to share this as well from kind of a security IQ and security awareness. I think this is a big topic as well in regards to making sure that your users are aware of what's out there and of potential risk, not only themselves, right, but the networks that they're accessing. And interesting enough, the numbers that we've seen in our report is that from a PC perspective and a home desktop perspective, we're pretty savvy and pretty cautious, right? We don't, we delete suspicious emails from people we don't know 90% of the time. Well, when they have a mobile device, it's only 56%. So we're not really thinking of it as much, even though the mobile device today is basically a PC, your PC in your hand, if not sometimes stronger, right? Basic antivirus, security endpoint solution, right? 72%, on a mobile, it's 33%, right? And then avoiding storing sensitive files online, we're cautious of that again on, as a home user using our desktop, but with a mobile device, it's a little less than half. So again, in another awareness campaign, which obviously is preventative from a security perspective, as people are using multiple devices, right, for access to information, content, and curriculum. So as I mentioned, it's kind of a dangerous mix, right? So, the prevalence of mobile devices, the maturing of mobile malware. Mark talked earlier about applications, application management, what ones are able to be used. There's a lot of third-party app stores where we find the majority of the malware that's coming from, and students and kids may not know, right? They want to go out and get that app, or a friend told them about an application to go download, right, that they can use for, writing documents or even playing a game or connecting with each other, right? And then obviously with that, as I mentioned, it mixes both the work and personal information. And I know Matt and mentioned those, and Mark as well, as far as how do we make sure that we can wipe that device? And I know Mark will talk about that here coming up as well. And to that point, Mark, again, I think as we talked, the impact of the BYOD and kind of what are those different strategies and things to think about.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Ben. So let me explain this slide a little bit. We have company owned on the left side, personally owned on the right, and managed versus unmanaged. So we very clearly say we don't want unmanaged institutionally owned devices. That's just a bad idea. At that point, you've given your users a device and you don't have a good chance of ever recovering it. But so what we want to make sure that we have on an institution-owned device, we certainly want to make sure we at least have a device control and management. So that's MDM. We want to be able to track that, just like I talked about earlier with using ITMS to be able to track, the acquisition of a device, where it lives on the network, who owns it, the department it belongs to. We want to be able to do the same thing with that mobile device. We can geolocate it, attach it to a user, and so forth, so that we understand that device. We have a way to recover it. We can wipe the device if it goes missing, so content isn't lost, and so forth. And then, of course, we want to be able to provide access and authentication and protect the device as well. So we can use tools like VIP to be able to provide two-factor authentication to secure information that we may be distributing to that device. And, of course, there's DLP for mobile, which would allow sensitive information from escaping from that device as well. But App Center kind of spans that bridge between the institutionally owned device and the BYOD device. Users are going to balk at having the type of control that MDM allows from an institution. And frankly, we don't want that sort of control over their device. They have their personal information, and we want to keep it separate. Using App Center, we're able to keep our information containerized from the rest of it, so we can provide data, we can provide applications to them. We can even put policies around it to secure that data in applications, do things that require strong authentication. But when that student has graduated, left the institution, we can pull that data back off, and they have their phone with their Facebook and their photos and everything else that they have. They just don't have access to the information provided by the institution anymore.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I guess in your experience, and Matthew, you chime in as well, do you guys see and have you seen a difference in strategy between maybe K-12 and school districts versus colleges and universities?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Matthew and I were actually discussing that, higher ed kind of invented BYOD before the term became popularized.
Yeah.
Right, way back when computers became around, they've been in the BYOD space and worked through managing different things. I mean, there were desktops and not necessarily mobile at the time, but we're certainly seeing higher ed work more on the BYOD strategy and K-12 working on the institution device, which makes sense. I don't see, a lot of second graders, hopefully with their own iPhone 5s out, but we are seeing school districts start issuing Surface tablets to, all the way down to elementary school students. And making sure that they have a safe computing experience, I think, is critical as well.
Mark, I'll even go back to the comment that we said a couple slides earlier about it not being a toy in your higher education environment. They're probably more loose in their strategy of managing that device compared to a K-12, which truly wants it to only operate the way they want it to operate. Right. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But, I mean, because you're at higher ed, you have adults with their own devices that should have the capability to make the right decisions of what they're doing with their device and how to access school curriculum and content. So there's a much more collaborative feeling, I think, along the higher ed institutions of how we're going to manage the situation where there's a real need for more controls around the K-12 space that I've seen.
And we'd even say at higher ed, even more of the faculty as well using it, and staff, not just the students.
Yeah, absolutely. We keep talking about the faculty and staff. I mean, they're on their devices making their lessons plan, making their lesson plans. They want to share their research, right? I mean, this isn't. They need the ability to go and do what they need to do to be effective as educators. And as IT, we need to be enabling them with the tools they can do that well with. So there's definitely and that's really the advantage of doing things not only on the mobile side, but to bring it back to application streaming. We can have these stacks of applications that go by role of a user, whatever their role is with the institution, to be able to focus on getting what they're supposed to be doing. Right? If I'm a student, I should be learning. If I'm a teacher, I'm educating. I'm an administrator, I'm helping enable everybody do their job well. We're taking, if you look at some of the other solutions that are in the stack for education, a lot of them are very limiting. So one common thing that you see between application streaming and App Center and so forth is our solutions really lay in the background. The interface of a mobile device with App Center looks no different than a native iOS or Android experience. The way we deliver applications, you have an icon on your desktop just like you normally would. We're not asking people to go to another environment for this access. And I think that's critical to get IT out of the way and just deliver to the user what they need to be effective.
Yeah, so maintain that user experience as intuitive as they would feel it normally would with what they use, with their iPhone or a tablet, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
that reduces your support costs and so forth, but you're absolutely right. That's a good point.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So going into some of maybe the recommended strategies and technologies to think about, for your schools out there in regards to being able to protect the information, the curriculum, content, within your environment and your classrooms. And I mentioned earlier around, the year of the mega breach and the amount of data breaches and identities being taken. Even, I've heard of premeditated identity theft where people are looking at kids under 18 for their, social security numbers and birth date and address and, holding on to them, and then they turn 18, boom, they start leveraging that information for cybercrime. So, that's, I think, the threat that's out there, and identity today is becoming more and more digital, right? Not necessarily, walking around with your college ID card with your social security number on it, as I had, but really starting to, I think, looking more tomorrow, like your digital profile, right? Your student profile that's now digital. So protecting that, and I think it's not more than just as having a data loss prevention solution. It's a layered approach. And Mark, would you agree? And what would some of the other things you would make sure that people would consider?
All right, so you hit it right on the layer. I was working with one customer who was explaining to me that they had they were working on a layered security approach, and they had 3 different DMZs with different firewall technologies. And I asked, if someone's able to breach through one firewall, why would the second one slow them down any further? So what we're talking about in security in depth and layering this approach is not making multiple doors to go pick. It's using different technologies to be able to prevent and then detect if there is an intrusion and then protect the critical data from leaving the network. So as Ben was mentioning, right, data loss prevention, we're able to see the data that is critical to the institution and track what happens to it, right? Make sure that it doesn't leave the boundaries within the network, regardless of how it's trying to be exfiltrated. But we also want, your traditional firewalls and so forth on the perimeter. We have email and web gateways that are looking at the application layer of what's happening. They're actually scanning and blocking potentially malicious attachments in email, drive-bys, if you've heard of that on websites where a website that may have content that is valuable to your user community may have been the victim of an attack and has malware that then is being pushed down to the user, the browser of that site. So we're able to, on top of looking for brute force intrusions, how is code trying to get into our network and what's trying to execute? Block it at the perimeter. And then, our host-based intrusion and detection, we're going to block it again back on the endpoint. So on top of your SEP and AV side, critical systems, we want to lock them down without requiring signature updates and that information about the current threats. We want to say, I don't care what this process is, I don't care what this code is, you are not pulling this data or changing this configuration of this machine or accessing, creating a buffer overflow, et cetera. so what we see is by having all of those pieces together of protecting at the gateway, protecting at the host, and then data loss prevention, preventing data from escaping back out, we have a much stronger threat posture than we would with any one solution by itself. And they work well together by being able to correlating events between what we're seeing on the endpoint and what we're seeing on the perimeter. We can start getting a much better detailed view of what threats we are seeing come into our environment.
Right, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. And obviously, some of the other things you can see on there is obviously with encryption, get lost laptops or tablets, encryption, having an encryption policy and authentication, leveraging a two-factor authentication as an app or cloud service, right, to make sure that people are, they say they are, when they're accessing information applications and logging in as well. We had a question come up around, recommended solutions as well for defending against malware, and ransomware. And you talked a little bit about Mark and Matt, that you want to chime in, is around the host-based intrusion detection and prevention, as well as the web gateway. What other things from here that you would recommend and as well?
Yeah, so malware, and I think I may have gotten a little ahead of myself. The first one, and I really liked your point that you had about security awareness. And this I think is actually a challenge that between higher ed and K-12 is a common theme, because they have built into the structure of the school, right, there's churn. So there's you don't have that institutionalized knowledge of a user base like you would in a corporate or government entity, where people have good security awareness programs that they can build upon. You have new people coming in every year that need to be trained, and a lot of that stuff, I mean, you can be aware, but it takes good practice before it becomes habit, and that becomes what's hard. So some of what the solutions we're talking about here, we still absolutely want users to be aware and practice good security sense. But we also want to protect them from, if they've made a mistake and clicked on that email to get money from the Prince of Nigeria, we don't want them to get the ransomware because of that, or have malware get infected. So that's again where we have multiple places to prevent malware. We're going to inspect traffic coming in from the perimeter through our email and web gateways. And we're going to use our SEP and antivirus technologies to inspect what's happening. And again, our host-based intrusion, which is leveraging the global intelligence network to look at the reputation of something. If this file is not been seen before, it's likely to be a permutation of malware that could be coming down and trying to infect us. And we can block that sort of behavior from there. So, I mean, our reputational and behavioral detection, the email and web security and the endpoint and the perimeter, and then our removable media is the other threat vector that we see a lot within students. They're passing around data and sharing information with each other through thumb drives and more now cloud sharing and so forth. We want to be able to block that, or at least inspect that, and have a way to prevent malware infections coming through that way. In fact, we just did a MAA for a client of ours, malicious activity assessment. And we found 2 machines that were reporting back from our web gateway that had a keylogger installed. And we started investigating how the keylogger got there, and it was a shared hard drive that was being shared among some of the users on the network. And their AV policy wasn't doing a full scan of removable devices on Connect. So it opened up a window to have that keylogger get installed and make its way around. So it was a good way. I mean, even though they thought they were practicing good security, and in many ways they were, having that web gateway in place was able to show that there was an infection on campus.
Right, right. And I think we may, get that, part of protecting information as well, right? I think not just students, right, the faculty, again, sharing information, or, unknowingly and not maliciously, right, having information around students and social security numbers, et cetera, right? Saving that to a flash drive and, and then going home with it to work on a different machine, right? So, protecting against that as well, right? I mean, it's not necessarily malicious attacks, but internal threats that are, not meant to harm, right? But you have policies around that. So one of the other things I think that was brought up, and I had mentioned kind of ransomware, is a great partner of ours as far as helping customers remediate, and Matthew maybe could talk to this, remediate some of that may have been hit by it, right, and helping them out with that.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, we definitely find customers that most of the time they think that they've got a good security posture and that they're actually going to have us come in, verify that posture, and then give them the next level of security. And through that assessment, a lot of times, like Mark mentioned earlier, we end up in a remediation process with them as well. So we agree with them. They've had a pretty good security posture most of the time, but yet you still have infections. So let's clean up the current environment that you've got and then move forward to keep that from happening again and take you to the next level of security. So remediation is absolutely a part of what we end up doing with customers.
That's great. Thanks, Matthew. And I know we talked a lot about this. Obviously, it's a hot topic and a major trend happening in not just education, right, but in all verticals on how to mitigate the mobile attacks. And Mark, I know you've got a lot of experience with this, and Matthew as well, with the customers you've worked with us on. Some points you'd like to make on on these technologies here. And again, we talked about a layered approach, but again, I think it gets back to the goals of our education customers and schools, right, to deliver the content on devices, on mobile devices, right, to help increase the outcomes for the students. So I'll pass it back to you as far as, sharing some of those experience and thoughts around those recommended strategies.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So we've talked some about application management. I think we've covered how we get applications to devices. One thing that we go through the device management. This is really important to be able to, I think, from a geolocation perspective, to be able to track where that device is and its information around it. And if something happens, I'm able to wipe the device in case of theft, or if it's been compromised, if it's been jailbroken, et cetera. But then we get into device security, where we want to have policies in place, just like on our desktops and laptops, to guard against malware. We're seeing a large number of vulnerabilities coming into the mobile space, and as Ben showed earlier, on a mobile device, we're seeing less aware, at least, of that there's a threat out there. And I think it's partly because it seems less like a computing device. We're used to the fact that there can be malware and spyware that gets installed on a computer, and I think that concept to a lot of users on a mobile device just isn't top of mind. And then, access to our data. I'll keep it brief. Using a solution like VIP and using App Center, being able to require strong authentication and giving users the ability to two-factor, it ensures that that person is who they say they are on the device that they are connecting from, which is critical, because these mobile devices, it may not be the student that is on that. I've seen, I share my mobile devices with my kids. Often they go play a game on it, but my corporate email is secured through App Center. It's Symantec secure email, and they can't get to it because it requires secure authentication to be able to get to that data. If my phone's breached, that data can be pulled back away immediately. And those are the sorts of things around mobile where we can mitigate the attacks before they happen.
Right.
Of course, it's starting with that good security awareness, and we take it from there.
Absolutely. So, and I think lastly on here, right, I think it's also kind of, be preventative about it as well, right? Understanding the vulnerabilities and managing that. And I know you had some good discussions around that with us and our customers as well. I mean, talked about the application piece of it, but what about some of the other pieces?
Sure. So we've talked some, I think you're right, around the application virtualization and then configuration and patch management programs. So where you want to do is develop a security policy and then have a way to enforce it. And what I've seen, between higher ed, K-12, and even our government customers is the part that tends to be lacking is the vulnerability assessment scan on a regular basis. They tend to happen every year or in some fashion, and there tends to be a lot of configuration drift. So what we really advocate in terms of vulnerability management is develop the process, roll out your security policies, and then audit much more frequently. And using CISSP and in conjunction with some of the other Symantec tools, we're able to really increase that timeline to keep everything where we expect it to be, because a lot can happen within that 1 year period where you're left vulnerable. So using, let's say the hardening of the OS helps out as well, because there's always a lag in patch management. The time a patch becomes available to the point where it's made public and to the point where you're able to deploy it to all of your end stations, especially in the size and scale of what our education customers deal with. That's a critical time frame where that information, that vulnerability is exposed. So having a secure operating system and having that audited to make sure it remains that way helps close the threat vector of if that attack can be successful or not in the meantime between patching.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. We're coming close up on some time here, so I think we'll wrap on just a couple of things to recap. And, one of the things that I had mentioned earlier around security awareness and having a best practice for the user, and I think, again, Mark, you addressed it in that as well, right? Even with that first point that we talked about it not being a toy for kids in the K-12 environment, but even with what they use on a personal level, and what faculty uses as well, and as users, right, and understanding these kind of 6 areas, right, know how to protect yourself, as Mark mentioned, to kind of keep up to date, know what you're doing, right, don't just click on a link or, understand what it is that you're doing within, on your device. Have an effective password policy. I know this is one as well, and managing the passwords. Think before you click. I think this is one where you find a lot of infections happening, right? Where you just oh, that looks cool, let me click on that, right? So again, making the user aware, and then also aware that to protect your personal data, right? It's valuable, obviously, to you. You don't want to lose it. You want to make sure you're backing that up as well, but also that you want to guard it and know that those threats are out there from a user perspective. And from kind of a organizationally for institutions and schools, right? Mark mentioned about the policies just about a couple of minutes ago there, right? Develop and enforce the right IT policies. Then you want to make sure you're authenticating the identities of the people who can access what they should be accessing. And then protecting the information, obviously not just a data loss prevention or encryption, but understanding how you leverage the email and web gateways solutions as well, managing the infrastructure from a delivery perspective, and this is kind of where you're really managing the mobile devices as well, and then protecting the infrastructure, right? Mark talked about hardening the OS, having the right endpoint protection, again with critical systems protections and gateway solutions as well. Whether it's either on-prem or leveraging the cloud to make sure that your information is following, again, from the top on the policies all the way down to the protection of the infrastructure. So with that said, Matthew, I guess I may throw it over to you for any closing remarks as we wrap up here. I know we're coming up on time and want to make sure we get some time for questions.
Yes, thank you, Ben. So I think as I've sat here and listened to Ben and Mark and then my comments back and forth, you can almost get overwhelmed with the amount of information that's been provided to you and start to think, wow, I mean, my goodness, how can I even begin to tackle all these pieces? The good part is that these solutions all work together as a big security strategy, but they also augment and plug in and out of what maybe your already existing strategy looks like today. So we can tackle, looking at the slide that's right there, two-factor authentication could be your first step into a more secure strategy than what you're currently using today. So don't be overwhelmed by the amount of information you've seen today and go, well, I'm only doing half of this stuff, or I'm not doing 2/3 of this stuff. How in the world do I tackle this now? That's one thing that customers look at. There is a managed process of taking steps to move forward so that tomorrow you're more secure than you were today, and a month later you're more secure than you were a month ago. So it's a managed process, and it's sometimes a multi-year process to get this completely enabled in your environment. So
absolutely, and ongoing, right? I mean, ever changing.
Ongoing, yeah.
Right? The landscape's going to continue to change. We're going to continue to leverage more and more technology to, like I said, increase our student outcomes, be better at delivering our the curriculum in schools, and get better access and information, for people to, people and students to learn. But with that's going to come some, some risk and managing that against the threats and, like I said, malicious and non-malicious that are out there that could impact the delivery of that content. So with that, Matthew and Mark, thank you for joining. There's I think a couple questions here that I'll read off from our from the chat here, and I know I have one here saying if we're using SCCM, will it work in conjunction with the semantic solutions? Mark, I know you guys have leveraged that as well. We talked about with our Altiris Technologies. You want to take that one?
Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, so we can extend SCCM around some of the stuff that our technologies do. It doesn't have to be replacement. They can work well with each other. So we've talked around application streaming. That's where SCCM can plays well in the environment is to collect the inventory, utilize WSUS to patch the environment, and so forth, and manage the devices, where application streaming will be able to provide content and applications to the user community. We can even take feeds from that inventory data and plug that into asset management, so you can start getting a comprehensive view of all the assets, both from the inventory perspective and tied into your physical inventory and other systems, so you can now barcode and locate where your devices are and do a physical audit and track that. And those are just capabilities that don't today exist in SCCM, but we can embrace that implementation, the technology you already own, to feed information into other parts of our solution stack to get you to where you need to be.
Great, thank you, Mark. Looks like I have another one in here. What kind of student, and I apologize, it wasn't coming through clearly here, what kind of student and university personally PII is retained by companies like Symantec and Advanced Marketplace? How much of this information is retained and for how long?
Ben, I'm not sure I understand that question.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think that might be maybe referring to us having the information, which we don't own that information, right? It's kind of on-site or protected. It doesn't come up to us. Maybe that might be referring to kind of a cloud service.
So Ben, when we get to our contact information in a minute, they can email you or I directly, and we can provide some more detail around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Ben, I've got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got one direct that came to me. Looks like they get emails that come from a person that they know the person, but the person never actually sent the email. So how can we overcome that type of clever ploy? In other words, looks like my wife just sent me an email, but it really isn't my wife. It's somebody has either got into her system or access to her email, or somehow making it look like it's something to do with me. So Ben or Mark, you got an answer for that?
So the The alternate answer would be if everybody took a few minutes and got an email certificate, so that you know it's validating that you are who you say you are when you're sending out an email. That's probably still that's probably not in the near future. So the short answer is you know, a product like Mail Gateway, you know, it's not going to necessarily flag that it's a false identity, but we can certainly make sure that there's no malware or spyware content has been delivered through that message.
Right. I was going to say the content of the body, or that's maybe hidden in the attachment. Right. It may look like an Excel attachment, you know, or link, and making sure that that link isn't malicious, or there isn't a malicious package that's going to be delivered on that attachment, right, to be scanned to make sure that that threat doesn't come through.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the speakers, Ben, Matthew, and Mark, again for an excellent presentation, and thank you to the audience for joining us. For those who tuned in late, please be on the lookout for a follow-up email after this presentation with a copy of the slides, a certificate of attendance, and a link to the archive to review and share with colleagues. And if you have any other questions that were not answered during this presentation, I think the panelists were gracious enough to field your questions, where you could submit to their email address that you have right there. There's their contact information. And again, we will have those in the slides, which we will email out to everyone shortly. So once again, thank you all very much.
Great. Thank you all. Have a fantastic day.